So the great example now, of course, is the coverage of Jerusalem. And it started immediately as Trump was making his speech the other day. The media started talking about, is there going to be violence? Is there going to be another intifada? And of course, that's what the coverage is focused on. People in the streets and tear gas and this and that, without sufficiently explaining why this is going on. Now, when this same thing happened in Ferguson or in Baltimore, the American media did go beyond the violence and explain why it was happening. It did go talk to the local people who were in the streets, as well as the policemen and the politicians. It did provide representatives of the demonstrators, mostly African American and other people on the streets in Ferguson or Baltimore or other places. They were able to present their views on television themselves.
These correspondents often lack the knowledge of the culture to be able to explain what is happening in this part of the world. Thank you.
He didn't necessarily go and pick out people that were necessarily representative of certain groups. So just, for instance, he wouldn't necessarily go and pick out a local human rights activist or a local protester who's leading a march. He would just walk into a cafe or walk into a bakery shop and start talking to people, say, you know, what do you think about what's going on? And he'd ask them, what do you think? He didn't ask them, what do you think is your government's view? What do you think? So the lesson there is that he genuinely, in his personality and in his reporting, he genuinely showed that he cared about what an ordinary person felt. This doesn't come through very much in the mainstream media. You know, people call me up sometimes and say, what do the Arabs think of Trump? I say, well, you tell me, what does the Republican Party think of Trump? Well, there's a whole range of views. What do the American people think of Trump? There's a wide range of views. So in the Arab world, it's the same. There's a whole range of views, of different views. So there are nuances in what people think.
We need more intensity in coverage. The numbers of correspondents, TV crews, the infrastructure of journalism in the Middle East is way below what it was when I covered the region, and way below what it needs to be. You simply can't do this job in a powerful way without more resources. He didn't accept the kind of meta-narratives that often were a product of what the big editors in Washington or New York thought. He let the story emerge from his own experience in reporting and curiosity. What is it? What's going on here? And that's one reason that his stories often have a contrarian quality. They just went the other way because they express not the dominant narrative that had been put together back in America, let's say, but they express the narrative that emerged from talking to people. Today, I don't need to tell you, people do not let us travel as freely as we did. It's still possible if you're willing to take enormous risks. We have a few colleagues, Robert Fisk, that comes to mind, who's ready to brave going into places where he doesn't know that he'll be accepted. But the firepower now is so intense, so dangerous to move around, that there's come to be a feeling that you need to be embedded with one side or another when you travel. And that has terrible negative consequences. It means you see the story not whole, not, this morning I'm in West Beirut, this evening I'm in East Beirut. You see one side of it because you're embedded with that side. It's now very hard to write an account of, say, Mohammed bin Salman, positive or negative, without getting completely drowned in crazy messages. It shouldn't be so. It shouldn't be so. It's really important for journalists to talk to him, to do real reporting, to figure out, is this, what's good here, what's bad here.
How much can newspapers afford to invest in that kind of coverage, which takes time and effort and money? And some people here, like Ayman Hanna of Skies, are suggesting that we do what BuzzFeed does and have journalists cover the, fluffy, superficial news on the one side, and then also have investigative teams go in and write about ISIS and what makes young women want to join them, etc. So balance of the quality reporting with some of the superficial reporting and journalism that people do to have an economically sustainable model.
So I remember when I was in college in the late 60s in the US, even the mentioning the word Palestinian was unusual. It wasn't talked about. Palestinians, especially before the 67 war, the issue of Palestine just didn't exist. And then after 67, it became a little bit more in the news. And then since then, we've had a significant change in some reporting by some quality media, which is unprecedented. We've seen recently the New York Times and the Washington Post have doubled and tripled their digital viewers. People paying money, $100 a year or whatever, to get quality compared to the rest of the American news. So the quality news, there is a demand for it. The readers are willing to pay for it. And this is an important business issue. And keep in mind that these are business commercial operations. Their main bottom line goal is to sell advertising.